Welcome to today's Explainer 8th graders. Okay, let's just jump right in with a quick mental exercise, all right? I want you to imagine, just for a second, that you weren't born where you are right now. Imagine you were born 1,000 years ago in a tiny, totally isolated farming village. Or, I don't know, maybe 100 years in the future on a completely self-sustaining space station. Would you still be you? I mean, you'd look the same, for sure, but would you care about the same things? Would you have the exact same fears, the same goals, the same sense of right and wrong? Probably not, right? Today, we're exploring a concept that answers that very question: architects of the soul. We are going to look at exactly how the world around us completely shapes the beliefs inside us. Now, consider this absolutely powerful quote from Romans 12:2. It says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." And this isn't just some ancient piece of advice. It's really the moral and spiritual foundation of what we're looking at today. The physical world around us, that pattern of this world, it exerts this massive, kind of invisible pressure on our minds, constantly trying to conform us to its values. Recognizing how environments shape our beliefs is literally step one in protecting and renewing our own inner minds. So, here's our agenda for the Explainer today. First, the power of setting. Second, shaping the inner world. Third, literature case studies. Fourth, mapping cause and effect. Fifth, test your knowledge. And finally, number 6, education with morality.
Okay, let's dive into section 1, shaping the inner world, how environment influences mindset. We often think of setting in a story as just the backdrop, right? Like the weather, the buildings, the time of day. But it is so much more than that. Picture this: a character living out in a dangerous wilderness. Every single day is just a brutal fight against the elements. What does that specific environment force them to value? Caution, self-reliance, pure survival. Now completely contrast that with a character growing up in a wealthy, bustling city. Their daily challenges are, obviously, totally different. Their environment values luxury, education, and social status. So the big takeaway here is that setting doesn't just dictate whether a character wears a heavy winter coat or a fancy silk suit. It literally programs their deepest internal values. It builds the whole lens through which they view the entire world. By the end of this explainer, you're going to master 3 specific skills. First, you'll be able to directly connect the details of a setting to a character's core values. Second, you'll learn how to explain exactly why different settings create vastly different outlooks on life. And third, you'll learn how to actually support your analysis with specific examples from whatever text you happen to be reading. And look, these aren't just skills for writing brilliant literary essays, though hey, they will definitely help you with that. These are real-world skills. They help you develop deep empathy by understanding exactly why the people around you think the way they do. Moving right along to section 2, literature case studies, seeing it in action. Because the absolute best way to understand an abstract concept like this is to look at 3 very different worlds you probably already know. First up, let's talk about the setting of The Giver. It is a futuristic, incredibly controlled community. The government there has literally engineered the environment to remove all variables. I mean, there are no weather changes, no intense emotions, no color whatsoever, and these strict, absolute rules of sameness. It's an incredibly rigid, predictable environment where absolutely nothing is allowed to stand out or disrupt the routine.
And here is where it gets really interesting. How does that physical setting shape Jonas's inner world? Well, because of this environment, Jonas starts the story holding a deep belief in sameness. He genuinely believes that difference is inherently dangerous. In his mind, if people are different, they make choices. And if they make choices, they might make the wrong choices, which leads to pain. It is so vital to understand that Jonas's initial belief wasn't some conscious choice he made. It was a direct, unavoidable result of the only culture he had ever known. His environment built his entire belief system from the ground up. Okay, let's completely shift gears and travel way back to the 19th century for our second case study, Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. Actually, fun fact about this one, Austen originally titled this book First Impressions. Anyway, we're in rural England in the early 1800s. This is a world entirely defined by strong class divisions, wealth, and land ownership. But the absolutely crucial detail of this setting is that women are legally and economically restricted. For a woman in this specific time and place, her entire future financial stability is tied directly to marriage. Because of that exact setting, we get what I like to call the marriage mandate. Characters like Mrs. Bennet are obsessed, and I mean obsessed, with marrying off their daughters. Now, if we ignore the setting, she just seems kind of crazy and annoying, right? But when we look at the environment, we realize her belief is driven by pure rural economics. In her world, marriage literally equals survival and status. The setting forces her to hold these values. Even a character like Elizabeth Bennet, who desperately wants to marry for love, still has to navigate the really strict boundaries this environment has set. The setting drives the whole central conflict of the novel. For our third example, let's jump into the dystopian world of The Hunger Games. The setting here is District 12, literally the absolute poorest district in the nation of Panem. Just paint a picture of this in your mind. It's a desperately impoverished home. Food scarcity is just a daily reality. Everyone is under the strict, brutal, and oppressive control of the capital. Simply finding enough calories to survive to the next day is an exhausting, constant battle. So how does this absolute nightmare of a setting shape someone like Katniss Everdeen? It hardwires her with a survival mindset. She deeply values self-reliance and extreme resourcefulness because, well, in District 12, if you aren't resourceful, you starve. Furthermore, she holds this profound, unshakable mistrust of all authority. Her cautious, rebellious, and untrusting nature, that's the direct psychological effect of living under constant suffering and capital oppression. The setting molded her into the exact type of person who could actually survive the games. And this brilliantly illustrates our next point. Let's look at Section 3, Mapping Cause and Effect, putting it all together. We've seen a futuristic utopia, a 19th century English village, and a dystopian nightmare. And this right here is your cheat sheet for literary analysis, bringing it all together into one predictable formula. Notice the clear cause and effect. In The Giver, the setting detail of strict sameness creates the shaped belief that difference is dangerous, which impacts the story by making Jonas initially accept the rules. Over in Pride and Prejudice, the setting detail of women's futures being tied to marriage creates the belief that marriage is essential for survival, driving the character's obsessive choices. And in The Hunger Games, food scarcity and oppression shape a belief in self-reliance and mistrust, which ultimately is exactly what allows Katniss to survive. Analyzing this chain reaction from environment to personal belief is a highly predictable and frankly just an incredibly useful tool. All right, Section 4, Test Your Knowledge, Homework Review. I'm going to ask you 5 rapid-fire questions based on your homework. I really want you to actively engage with this. Try to think of the answer in your head before I give it to you. Let's see how much you've absorbed. Question 1. How can a setting shape a character's beliefs? Think about it for a sec. Well, the answer is that the environment forces a character to adapt to its specific challenges and values. If a setting demands survival, the character naturally values caution. The physical world basically programs the inner world. Okay, question 2. Give an example of a setting that might make a character value independence. What are you picturing? You might picture harsh, isolated conditions, a lone cabin in the deep wilderness, a marooned spaceship, or even an impoverished area like District 12, where relying on others is just a luxury you literally can't afford. Moving on. Question 3. Give an example of a setting that might make a character value tradition. Got one? This would be an environment deeply rooted in history with really strict social rules. Think of a long-established royal court, a deeply religious ancient village, or the super-rigid class system of 1800s rural England like we just saw in Pride and Prejudice. Question 4. How can a setting challenge a character's beliefs? Let me give you a quick hint here. Think of Jonas. Right. When a character experiences a totally new aspect of a setting or travels to a different one entirely, those new experiences create massive conflict with their old environmental programming. Growth happens when the setting introduces something the character's old beliefs just can't explain. And finally, question 5. Why is it important to connect setting to character beliefs? Well, as we've been discussing, answering this correctly is the absolute key to writing brilliant, deeply analytical essays. But even more importantly than that, it's the key to understanding people in the real world. When you know where someone comes from, you can finally understand why they value what they value. Which leads us beautifully to Section 5, Education with Morality, the ultimate goal. We've spent this explainer looking at literature and talking about writing essays, but why does analyzing this matter to your own life and your own spiritual journey? Well, check out this quote from Academy. Education without morality will hurt. What's the point of being smart and continuing to make bad choices? This is the core philosophy I really want you to walk away with today. Listen, you can be the smartest student in the room. You can analyze the Hunger Games perfectly, but academic intelligence must absolutely always be paired with biblical morality. If you're smart, but you lack a strong moral compass, your intelligence isn't going to protect you from making choices that end up hurting yourself and others. And this ties perfectly into Romans 8:6-7. It offers this really profound promise. There is peace of mind for everyone who keeps their mind spiritual. Remember our first slide about not conforming to the pattern of this world?
When you analyze how environments shape characters, you actually learn to spot how your own environment is trying to shape you. By setting your mind on spiritual things, you resist worldly conformity, and instead, you get to experience true, lasting peace. And trust me, this isn't just theory, it is a lived experience.
So, as we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought. Think about the music you listen to, the friends you hang out with, the social media feeds you scroll through every single day. That is your setting. So, how is your everyday setting shaping your mind right now? And more importantly, what are you actively choosing to let influence your beliefs? Remember, you are the architect of your own soul. Choose your building materials wisely. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.